Hey everyone, and thanks for joining another special episode of DIB Innovators here in Salt Lake City at the 47G Zero Gravity Summit. Today I've got the privilege of Anders Erickson. He's with Eide Bailly as a cybersecurity principal. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, you bet. Glad to be here.
Eide Bailly, a great partner of RADICL, but for those that don't know, Eide Bailly kind of accounting background, but tell me, why you're here at this event and how you got into this business.
Yeah, sure. Well, Eide Bailly is a top 20 accounting firm. Got offices all across the country. And so we do a lot of compliance type work. My background is in IT security. So I spent the first 11 years of my career in Washington, D.C. doing IT security audits for the federal government. And so I spent the last 12 years with Eide Bailly doing the same kind of stuff, but in the SMB space. And so it's just been a great transition as we started getting CMMC hitting our radar and cybersecurity maturity model on our radar. It's like, well, this is a great opportunity with my DoD background to get involved and so making some investments. And so anytime there's an opportunity to talk about compliance with IT security, I think we've got a role to play and a story to tell. So it's great to be here.
Because compliance is such a fun topic.
Well,
It's kind of like accounting.
it's like a dentist, right? I mean, at the end of the day, I'm leaving and I'm glad I went, but I didn't enjoy it.
No, but it is critical. Talk to me about your DoD background.
Yeah. So first 10 years, like I said, I was with PwC in Washington, D.C. and got involved in doing audits and security consulting in the intel space, DoD space. So spent time with National Reconnaissance Office, NSA, Homeland Security. But when you go to those organizations, there's a lot of systems that are large. You're going to see stuff there that you've never seen anywhere else in size and scale and scope. And so it was a great foundational kind of practice to understand how security should be set up in accordance with NIST and these national standards and requirements. And then bring that into the SMB space. Now you can kind of help some of these smaller businesses really begin to adopt some of these best practices that were established at a larger level.
So that makes sense there. But now Eide Bailly, accounting services, public accounting, professional services. Does the IT portion roll up in the professional services you've got as active consultants?
Yeah. So we've got really three different groups within Eide Bailly. You got your traditional tax and audit. Then we have a whole advisory team. And so Eide Bailly does a lot of different various types of advisory and large technology consulting. We're a large NetSuite implementer. We do a lot of Salesforce. We got large data analytics and AI teams. The group I'm with focuses on cybersecurity and the implementation of cybersecurity and the improvement of cybersecurity. So that's where we get the audits in there. So there's a number of different ways in which we touch technology, and compliance is just one aspect of that.
How does a company use Eide Bailly? Let's say I'm a 100-person company and I need help with cyber. Are you consultative? Are they contracted? Like, what does that look like, that model, and get your model?
We do all different kinds of, because we work in both sort of the assurance area or the audit side, and we also work in the consultative side. We really try to put clients in one bucket or the other. And because we want to maintain our independence, if we've got a client that comes to us and says, we need help, well, we've got our assurance and our audits that services. We also have consultative practices. In some cases, we don't have a well-established, mature consultative practice. So that's where we rely on partners like RADICL, bring them to the table and say, well, if you need cybersecurity in X, Y, Z, or this type of widget or tool, why don't you go talk to RADICL? They can help you get ready. And then when you're ready for an assessment, whether it's a CMMC or a SOC 2 or any type of attestation, then you come back to us. We can help you out there.
That's great. Ballpark, how many SMBs are you working with in kind of this new, and it's defense industrial base with the CMMC numbers? Like, how many are you kind of engaged with, or you touch points with, or have you contracted with?
Yeah, well, Eide Bailly itself has 80,000 clients across the country. And so there's a deep pool of the SMB space that we get the opportunity to operate in. And within that, there's a subset of those that are already doing contract work with the Department of Defense. And so as we begin reaching out to those, we find that we've got hundreds, in some cases thousands, of clients that we are beginning to engage with and talk with about cybersecurity maturity model certification, how we can get involved. And some of them, have already begun going down that road and they feel like they're in a pretty good place. But some of them are like, what is this? I don't even know what it is. And so when we look at our pipeline, it is incredibly strong. And when we look at the opportunities that are there, we're thinking, well, we've made some investments. Those are going to pay off, and how are we going to be able to continue to capitalize on this?
Yeah, that's great. And it is shocking, isn't it? I mean, CMMC has been around since, on this date, entered 171, since 2017.
Yeah, decade.
And then CMMC has been cooking for 5 years. The fact that someone hasn't heard of it is just mind-blowing.
Yeah, well, it's a great testament to the federal government being able to develop something and not educate people about it.
Yes.
That's what happens, and it'll get around.
Absolutely. So you talk with customers, they're like, ooh, not sure about CMMC. They're not sure about their, security stack or security services, what they need. What do you think the biggest, gaps are right now in an SMB space on those two topics?
I think a lot of it's the scoping part of CMC. When they think about CMC, there's a big hurdle. It's like, well, how am I going to begin with this? And you start looking at the costs and what they're going to have to do to get there. I think it'd be pretty overwhelming for a small mid-sized business. But what's important to remember is that you can control the scope to some degree because it's all about the data. It's about where the data goes. And so if you want to make sure that everybody in your organization can touch CUI, well, that's going to increase the scope potentially. But if you can say, well, what's the CUI we're getting or creating, and how can we get that that footprint as small as possible? You can begin to affect that scope by really reducing our CUI footprint. And in an SMB space, a lot of times you find out, well, we may have 10 people, but really only 2 people need to touch this stuff. And we've got this infrastructure we built out, but maybe we don't need all of our infrastructure to touch CUI. Maybe we only need a small enclave we can build, or maybe there's just a tool we can get to help facilitate that. So beginning to scope CMMC and really get that scope as small as possible is going to be a critical piece.
Share with me like a use case. You don't have to use company name, but where you came in, you really impacted their ability and just what the results or outcomes were from it.
Yeah, we had a manufacturer that came to us and initially came to us and said, we need 70 GCC high licenses for Azure GovCloud. And so we said, well, before you do anything, let's talk about how you're using CUI and what you're doing with it. Because they were under the impression they're going to have to take their whole infrastructure and switch it from commercial to GovCloud. And they were thinking in huge scales like that. And we came in and said, well, let's talk about what you're getting. And they're saying, well, most of what we do is in the commercial space, and most of what we provide to the DoD is also available in the commercial space. What we get from the DoD is actually CUI. We found out it was just periodically they get purchase orders, and they may get some schematics on things DoD would want altered. But even when they get they would alter their designs. They would make sure with the DoD that, hey, is it okay if we put this into commercial? It would all become part of the commercial build out. And so anything that's commercially available is not necessarily is out of scope of CMMC usually. So what we help them settle on is really your scope shouldn't be your whole infrastructure. It really should be you need about 3 people to get access to CUI, and what you need is just to build out an enclave in the Azure GovCloud, have a couple people who can access it through a VDI, and all of a sudden your scope went from very large to a very small implementation, and it's scalable.
Yeah, and that's the hard thing I think for these small companies is to recognize there are optionality with this requirement. You got to find a good partner to do that.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's one of the things when we go in to do an assessment. What we're finding is things that we're looking for. What are the things that can help reduce the cost to an SMB for an assessment? And one of the things that we find is most effective is if they've partnered with a good consultant to help them get ready. Some organizations are like winging it, and they're going and saying, hey, I've got a cyber guy. We should be able to do this. They're not ready for the rigor of an assessment. But if we come to the table and we say, who you're working with, they're like, we're working with RADICL. We're working with organization XYZ. They're helping us get ready. Well, if we work with that organization before, we understand that there's a reduced risk on our side and reduced time period because they're going to come to the table with policies and procedures, evidence in place. And it's going to help our assessment go a lot more smooth.
Yeah, it just really highlights the power of partnership.
Yeah.
If we go through a readiness exercise with a company, set up their security stack so they're meeting compliance and secure, secure being the number one. You guys are on that journey with us. You've seen us before. It makes that whole process so much simpler and reduces time, cost, and risk.
And that's what's going to make this actually scalable and doable for a community and an ecosystem the size of the DIB. It's these partnerships. It's being able to say we can get efficiencies working with MSPs and MSSPs that understand what they're putting in place for their customers, bringing them to a C3PAO, and the C3PO being able to say, I can reduce my costs because I understand what's being brought to the table. Likewise, the other thing that's going to make this scale is that C3POs need to change their outlook of what their mission is. And it can't be just my organization is going to be, I'm going to house this, I'm going to execute this assessment all with my in-house people. The C3POs got to start changing the way they're thinking about how we're delivering this to the DIB. So I've got to go get all the assessors I can within the ecosystem. And I got to get these people lined up to help me execute on this work. And I'm becoming not the executor of assessments. I'm becoming the risk manager. And I have the risk management framework in place that allows me to bring in assessors from outside my organization so I can run 7, 8 assessments at once because I've got a deep pool and I'm just managing the risk assessment, the risk management process of the CMMC assessment, not the whole assessment.
And I think that's powerful because there are a lot of well-intentioned and very good organizations that are backlogged a year.
Yeah.
Because, and we talked about this a little bit yesterday, but they're just doing it with their own people. They're not reaching the partner ecosystem. If I come to you today and I go, I think I'm ready. I've been working with a RADICL. I need an assessment. How long till you can get them assessed?
Well, I just had someone this morning came and said, I need to move it up to December 1st. Can you do it December 1st? And said, yep, we can get it done. So we can move the pieces around. We can bring the resources to get it done when people need it done.
Yeah, that's great. And so you hear the horror stories of 9 months to get assessed. Doesn't have to be that way if you find the right partners.
Right. Exactly.
Well, you don't know necessarily that Eide Bailly does this.
Right.
So that this is good to help get the name out.
Right.
There are a lot of other.
We try to keep it a secret. I mean,
yeah. Well, you do have your own top funnel, if you will, of opportunities. You got to help your customers first, probably.
Yeah, and I think that also it's important to create these types of relationships, these kind of partnerships, because I think that, Eide Bailly's customers are going to be looking for solutions and we're going to try and reach out to them, but we got to get it from all different angles. And you're going to have customers who are going to need it. And so we've got to be able to facilitate that type of response.
Absolutely. So let's take a customer that doesn't know anything, how would you walk them through, okay, here's what you need. Starts with meeting, scoping, we kind of walk through the process to the final assessment.
Are you talking about the actual, somebody goes to say, I need an assessment. What's the assessment?
No. They're one of your customers and just like, okay, you call them, apparently CMMC's coming down, it becomes law in a week for the 48 CFR. What do I need to do?
Well, first I'd say, we'll go talk to RADICL. But if they were saying, well, what are my first steps? We'd talk a little bit about, well, there's a couple steps you want to really do first. The first is, we call it sort of our 8 initial steps for CMMC for getting ready. The first thing is you want to look at the DoD contracts you've got. Well, what is the CUI we're getting access to? And then you want to look at the movement of those around your organization. So how does that CUI move? Who touches it? What are we creating? Who are we sharing it with? Then you start looking at things like, well, now I understand where my CUI goes, what it touches. Let's start categorizing my assets. What is a CUI asset? That's a person, the technology, a process that touches CUI. What are the security protection assets? I want to categorize those things that are protecting those CUI assets, my firewalls, my switches, all these different, my multi-factor authentication. These are security protection assets. So there's ways of going in and being able to help scope what's in scope of CMMC. You want to look at your environmental factors. Well, how many locations do I have? You want to look at things like your actual costs. We have some pretty deep conversations with organizations about costs because they want to know, well, how am I going to budget for this? And if as a consultant coming in with RADICL or Eide Bailly, anybody coming in to say, what's CMMC going to look like? We've got to be able to project costs. And that's, again, where then these partnerships are important. Because when RADICL's sitting down to talk with a company about CMMC, and they want to know, what is my all-in cost? The more we've worked together, the more you're going to understand what the actual assessment cost is. Because an organization who's helping a company get ready, they can say, I can kind of ballpark what we're going to cost, but what is the assessment going to cost? And the more we work together, the more you're going to be able to say, well, here's our cost. We were pretty sure the assessment is going to fall within this range. And that's going to be able to help an organization really get their arms around what's my budget going to be the next year for this.
Absolutely. What drives from an assessment perspective, because a lot of times this is unknown, what drives the cost? Because not all companies are created equal.
Yeah. If you're talking about the SMB space, it's interesting because the number of users doesn't usually drive costs. A lot of people say, well, how many users you got? That's an important piece of it. But really, it's things like your the architecture. Do you have a VDI? Are you using a hybrid model? Is it on-prem? What's your architecture look like for this CMMC system? You want to look at things like your external service providers. Well, how many cloud service providers, managed service providers are you utilizing? Because each of those will have a different level of effort in what the assessor has to look at. And then something like preparedness of documentation. And I think I mentioned also, whether you're working with an external service provider who's a consultant to come in and help you get ready, that's a critical factor in our costs. Is we know you're working with somebody we've worked with, well, we know that reduces our risk.
Right. And also, I think how many locations that handle CUI, because then you have to go on site, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And they'll come to us, an organization comes and says, I've got 10 locations. We're not going to visit all 10 locations. We can do sampling on that. And we can say, well, here are the ones we feel like are most critical. Everything should be risk-based. And I think that's where working with an organization like Eide Bailly is helpful, But we've been doing IT audits and assessments for decades. And so we approach these from a risk management perspective. It's not a check the box mentality for us. We're not in a gotcha state point. Let's evaluate risk. When we're evaluating a particular security practice, we're going to look at it from a risk-based perspective. We know in some cases, I don't need to dig as deep here. I can ask the questions, get the evidence I need. In some other areas, we know we've seen risk. We understand your architecture. We can say, maybe I need to ask some follow-up questions here. And so you get a much more focused review and more efficient review when it's risk-based and not just check the box mentality.
Yeah, that's great. And you're obviously quite wise on this. It's great talking, and sharing that. We're here at 47G. You guys are out here. What's kind of your purpose? What do you think of this organization? How much have you worked with them?
Yeah, we've been working with 47G for a couple of years now. We really like the fact that they are localized and they're connected with the actual businesses that are working with, many of them with the defense industrial base. And so we find it's a very efficient method for getting our messaging out and connecting with people who need our services. And what's great is that when we get in with an organization and we begin helping serve them and do just CMMC, what they realize is that Eide Bailly's got a lot more to offer than just CMMC and cybersecurity. We do a lot of tax and audit work in the SMB space. A lot of these organizations who are doing manufacturing and distribution, they're doing a lot of research and development. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, we've got some R&D tax credit specialists who could come in and really help you save some money on taxes. And so there's a much deeper bench that they can look at with an organization the size of Eide Bailly and the resources of Eide Bailly to come in and help them, not just with CMC, with a lot of other stuff.
Yeah, so talk to me then. You've talked to a lot of companies, a lot of organizations. You're very active, like in organizations with 47G. What do you think is going to change in the next 5 years in cybersecurity and compliance? And we'll stick to CMMC specifically. How's this landscape going to unfold as the 80 to 100,000 companies need to get assessed? Where the cybersecurity threat's going to change? What's your perspective?
Yeah, everybody could talk about AI until they go blue in the face. I think from a threat perspective and from a tools perspective, AI has to be part of that conversation. It's going to be part of what we're trying to fight against and what we're also trying to bring to the table to make it more efficient. When you look at an audit, an audit is one of those professions or one of those activities that is prime for AI. You're just basically taking a framework and you're evaluating against that. And it's hard to imagine a world 3 to 5 years from now where audit is not deeply affected by AI because it could be so prescriptive. And so being able to embrace AI, but yet bring the value of the people are going to bring to that. And so
judgment.
Yeah, judgment. But also it's that human touch. It's because I think everybody at some point is going to say, I get the same email. I know this is written by AI. I need to talk to somebody and to get a real straightforward answer. And I think being able to bring to the table a strategic and a people-focused approach and conversation is going to be really valuable in the future. So I'm hoping that's what we're going to be able to bring to all this. I think when you look at organizations like this in the future, they're going to continue to be more critical. And that locally, I think it's going to be important for partnerships. We talked about it. They talked about it here in some of the presentations. These partnerships are so critical to doing things efficiency. Talk about CMMC. So the partnerships are going to be critical on the assessment level and for C3PAOs to have those bench strength of all the assessors they can bring. It's all going to be about partnerships in the future.
Absolutely. Well, why don't you provide any final thoughts you have either for Eide Bailly or just, this conference and this customer set at large?
Well, no, just grateful for the opportunity to be here. It's been great to get and connect with RADICL. We get to work with you guys on a number of these conferences and again, passing opportunities back and forth. And it's just been a treat to get here and talk with you a little bit. And then hopefully just going to continue to build out this service line and work with you more. Thanks so much.
Oh, it's great. If someone wants help, how would they contact you?
Yeah, so I'm Anders Erickson with Eide Bailly. I'm available on LinkedIn. You reach out to me. Also at Erickson@eidebailly.com. EIDEBAILLY.com. There you go. So Eide Bailly. But yeah, you reach out to me. I'd love to have a conversation. And we're not the kind of culture where we nickel and dime and we're trying to just suck everything out. And people just have questions and they're like, what does this mean for me? Love to just get on the phone and talk about how we can help, or if you've got questions, what we can answer for you.
Yeah, that's perfect. Well, thanks, Anders. Look forward to talking in the relationship.
Yeah, thanks a lot.